Hello and welcome. Today we're looking at the funny thing that happened in Paris, France, at the new Global Financing Pact organized by French President Emmanuel Macron, and how some presidents of some African countries actually did Africa very, very proud. But one funny thing that happened is that our own president, Tinubu, was somehow missing in action. Our dear Mr. Teamship that knows how to distribute questions could have gone there to shine and show how wonderful his teamship strategy works by taking his people there and, those their discussion session. Instead of discussing himself, he would just distribute the questions when other presidents are there, not distributing the questions. But he chose not to be present because I've not seen any video about him. So if you have seen a video of him in any of the discussion sessions, please send it to me. I need it. Right now, it is the president of Kenya, it is the president of South Africa, and president of Ghana that we see doing Africa proud. They were arguing the same arguments that I make here on this platform about how the IMF and the World Bank are not acting in Africa's best interests. How countries should deal with the World Bank is how you see President Ruto of Kenya and President Ramaphosa of South Africa. That's how you see them talking, like presidents of countries that know what's up, that know the hidden agenda of the IMF and the World Bank. You see them arguing, telling Emmanuel Macron that, look, we need to readjust. You cannot be giving us loan to keep us indebted. That's what they are telling Emmanuel Macron. That's what they are telling the IMF. That's what they are telling the World Bank. But what is our president doing? We hear that Tinubu is going to solicit for these same loans that the Kenyan president and the South African president are rejecting. That's what our president is looking for. And Dele Alake had the joy of heart to tell Nigerians that, there will be flooding of foreign direct investment. This is what you get when you start an administration on a very, very wrong foundation. And nobody should expect any magic to come, because if the foundation is wrong, there's nothing anybody can do. If the foundation is destroyed, there's nothing anybody can do. The loans that others are questioning, they are the loans that we are begging for, meaning we do not understand that we are walking into a trap, or we have a group of leaders that are excited and happy to sell their fellow citizens into slavery. That's what it means. Look at the trip to Paris. Other presidents doing wonderful. I'll play you the video. Other presidents doing fantastically well. But our own president is missing in action. Anyway, let's look at it. We want to deal with the part two. Part two of, can any good thing come out of the Tinubu administration? Yesterday, we dealt in depth and looked into the fuel subsidy thing. Although it's just scratching the surface, but it gives very detailed explanation about things that people need to know about the so-called fuel subsidy regime and how we need to actually be probing the fraud called fuel subsidy, and how there's no need to increase the pump price of petrol, how there's no need to put the Nigerian people through this unnecessary stress. Absolutely no need. Yet, that's the part that the Tinubu administration has chosen to tread, not minding that Nigerians are suffering, but insisting on doing the bidding, something that will favor the IMF and the World Bank in the name of foreign direct investment. This is the same foreign direct investment that President of Kenya is rejecting. The President of South Africa is querying. The same thing with the President of Ghana. But our own president was not even present. And then we are told that there's going to be a flooding on foreign direct investment. Don't enslave us. These foreign companies are subsidized by the US and EU and UK, and they are used to manipulate the economies of other countries, like Nigeria, that will not be smart enough to reject it the way Kenya is doing, the way South Africa is doing, the way Ghana is doing. That's what they are doing. How would you... Okay, so the United States or the EU slaps sanction on a country they are not happy with. How do you think they execute such sanctions? It's through these multinational companies, through the multinational banks. Look at what is happening in Ukraine, for instance, where the US-led alliance, in conjunction with the EU and UK, slaps sanction on Russia, slaps sanction on Iran and all the likes. How do they execute it? They use these private banks, JP Morgan Chase, Citibank. They use all those private banks to effect their sanction. They use private companies to effect their sanction. The government gave a directive, and all the major multinational companies moved out of Russia. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? For those of you who argue that, oh, government has no business being in business, what does that tell you? You hear repeatedly that the United States of America keeps arguing that the companies like Huawei, companies like TikTok are under the control of the Chinese government. These are private multinational companies that are owned by people that are from China. But because of the strong competition that these companies pose to American-owned companies, the American government comes out publicly to protect American companies by slapping sanctions on these Chinese companies. And then they come out and tell you that their own multinational companies are privately owned, the same multinational companies that the American government subsidizes, and the American government can give instruction to, and they must obey. They must obey. The American government keeps coming out to complain about Huawei and complain about TikTok, saying that these companies work for the Chinese government. But these are companies that you and I know are private companies. But the fear of the American government is that Huawei and TikTok are being used by Chinese government to spy on America. Now, recall what adage our parents used to say, that it takes a thief to catch a thief. It takes a thief to know a thief. If the American government is this concerned that the Chinese government is using private multinational companies like Huawei and like TikTok to spy on America, imagine what America is using its own private companies to do, considering that they can just give an executive order and the companies are bound to obey them. They slap sanctions and the companies are bound to obey them. The American government has no influence on Russia. The only influence they have is through the private multinational companies. When you hear of the sanction against Iran, it is not country to country. It is the private multinational companies to the companies in Iran. That's to tell you that this whole idea of, oh, the oil companies in America are privately owned, it is a lie. It is a secret strategy that the American government, some people in the American government have devised to use their own multinational companies to secure influence and buy over probably even dissolve the sovereignties of other countries that allow them by asking for devaluation of their currencies, by asking for removal of subsidies, and by asking for privatization. So they will come in the name of foreign direct investment through the World Bank and say they want to give us loan or they want to buy over our corporation because we have privatized. And because we have removed subsidy, which they forced us to do, they will now sell to us our products and services, sell to us at exorbitant prices to maximize their profit. Profits that they can now repatriate with ease through the unification of the FX window. That's what they are doing. And people are clapping for them. It is a shame. It is a shame because you see people that are supposed to be learned, people who are supposed to know, and they simply don't know because they have been taught garbage. It's not me saying it now. I'll play you this video and then you tell me.
Okay, and the World Bank continued it. They forced most countries to eliminate all food subsidies and food support. Okay, because once you don't produce your own food, I increase my control over it. How do we know this? Well, very funny thing happened some years ago. Not so funny, actually. It involved starvation of a large number of people in Malawi. Okay? Many of you could remember this because it was really tragic. But the Malawian finance minister, who was under terrible threat at the time, suddenly broke ranks and he said, well, you know why we had this famine? Because one of the conditions of the loan given by the World Bank was we destroyed all our grain surplus stocks. Why? Because remember, we want you dependent.
Did you see that? They want us dependent. That is exactly why they are forcing us to remove subsidies. There's a previous part of this video where Nicholas Howard was describing how America and the EU and UK are the countries with the biggest subsidies for health, education, even these private companies, they subsidize them. Yet they come to Nigeria, they come to Africa, and they tell us through the IMF and the World Bank, which is serving their purpose anyway, they tell us to remove subsidies. They tell us to remove subsidies. Now, if the subsidy, particularly the fuel subsidy in Nigeria, was even existent in the first place, then asking us to remove the subsidy is still wrong morally, because they themselves are keeping those subsidies in their own end. They subsidize their own oil companies. In America, they do. Meanwhile, they come to Nigeria and ask us to remove subsidies. Now, subsidy in Nigeria never existed. It was a fraud. Them asking us to remove subsidy is not remove subsidy directly. They are asking us to increase the pump price of petrol so that when we now ask them to come and give us foreign direct investment, they will give us the loans that never leave their countries and use those loans to buy up private companies here by way of investment and begin to produce goods and services for us and sell at exorbitant prices, prices that makes them more competitive than we are. And our people are falling for it. The likes of Dangote, they are falling for it. It is such a shame. And we have business people that are falling for these things. In fact, the most annoying one is Kingsley Moghalu coming on national TV to say that devaluation of the naira is good. That he was even advising Tinubu that Tinubu should not strengthen the naira because it will not make us competitive. Really? Really? I will tell you, let me play this video. You will see exactly why people like Kingsley Moghalu, people like Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala are a failure to Africa and to Nigeria. Many people hail them, but really they are just failures because they are not able to defend the interest of Nigeria against these world powers. They are just there serving, doing the bidding of these world powers. I'll play you the video now.
1970s, the US Senate, the US Congress said, we will not allow Latin America to produce their own food. We will start a strategy involving the IMF and the World Bank to destroy food self-sufficiency of Latin America. Then they will indeed be our true backyard. And that's exactly what they've done. Look at all the Latin American countries. Look at them. They used to be food self-sufficient, but they're no longer food self-sufficient. Now here comes the kicker. This is the beautiful part of it. I congratulate them. You know, I admire them because they do it so well. Okay, I know it sounds really perverse, but we have now in the WTO something called the Agreement on Agriculture. Okay, you know what that Agreement on Agriculture states? It says, if you don't have any subsidies, you're not allowed to put these subsidies on food. But if you have subsidies and income support for food production, you can keep them. Who has all the subsidies and income support? US, Europe. The largest budgets in the world for supporting their farmers are Europe and US. But the World Bank and IMF have destroyed all those subsidies. You see, all those subsidies have been destroyed. And now we're telling these countries, you don't have subsidies? Tough luck. You know, you see, we're keeping them dependent. We're keeping them on a string. We have lots of examples in the WTO to really stop Africa industrializing. This is the crucial thing. We cannot allow them to produce manufacturers. It's not difficult. Trust me, it's not difficult. We need nationalist governments. We need them committed to industrialization, and it won't take them a decade to move out from where they are. This is the fundamental point. It's not difficult. But this next round of the WTO is designed to block that. If we had time, I would go through all the different things that they're trying to put into place to block anyone else getting on top of the ladder. You've read this book of Hajun Chang, Kicking Away the Ladder. You see, when we become rich, we make sure the others can't climb up the ladder and join us. Okay? And this is what this next Doha round is about. It's to make sure, especially sub-Saharan African countries, do not escape. You see, we teach, in many cases, garbage. And it doesn't hurt anyone, a lot of this garbage. You know, it's just blah, 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 blah. And we don't know what we have learned, but anyway, we were there at the university and you got a certificate and you go away and you feel you've learned something. But sometimes we teach very destructive things. But this next round of the WTO is designed to block that. If we had time, I would go through all the different things that they're trying to put into place to block anyone else getting on top of the ladder. You've read this book of Hajun Chang, Kicking Away the Ladder. You see, when we become rich, we make sure the others can't climb up the ladder and join us. Okay? And this is what this next Doha round is about. It's to make sure, especially sub-Saharan African countries, do not escape. You see, we teach, in many cases, garbage. And it doesn't hurt anyone, a lot of this garbage. You know, it's just blah, 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 blah. And we don't know what we have learned, but anyway, we were there at the university and you got a certificate and you go away and you feel you've learned something. But sometimes we teach very destructive things. And no more important than when we're teaching people from developing countries. Okay, and one of those very damaging and destructive things is the doctrine of comparative advantage. It's a lie from beginning to end. It's up.
You know, it's a shame that we have top Nigerians like Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala at the WTO who are aware of these things, and yet they put in no effort to defend the interests of Nigeria, of Africans. They don't. And you know, the funny or annoying thing is that we actually do celebrate them. We celebrate them. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is seen as, oh, one of Africa's rare gems. But is she now? Like Howard Nicholas said, Howard Nicholas is a professor at the International Institute of Social Studies in Hague, Netherlands. Like he said, the West have designed a system to teach rubbish, particularly to African countries, and those rubbish are meant to make our so-called educated elites use those rubbish to keep us enslaved. If not, why would we have somebody like Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala at the WTO, and then we are talking about lack of industrialization in Nigeria and indeed sub-Saharan Africa, and she does nothing? And people are clapping for her and hailing her as one of the heroes of Nigeria. It is such a shame, because the WTO, together with the IMF and the World Bank, are some of the Bretton Woods institutions that are being used to keep Africa down, to make sure that Africa continues to be impoverished, to make sure that Africa never gets industrialized. What Africa needs is rapid, aggressive industrialization. Somebody like Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala should know this. But no, while she was even the Minister of Finance, she could have exposed the fraud in subsidy. But no, she chose to tell us the lies that the Minister of Petroleum then, Diziani, was telling Nigeria. She was repeating it to us, telling us that there was a landing cost for petrol. Meanwhile, there was none. They were simply doing oil swap. And she had the power. She was in the rare vantage position to take Nigeria out of the mess that is in, to push us into industrialization. She could have reactivated Ajaokuta Steel, but no. She was at the forefront of helping to kill Ajaokuta because it was under her watch, as coordinating Minister of the Economy and Minister of Finance, that the wonderful thing that Yaradua did, revoking the license for Ajaokuta to the Gomta brothers, it was under her watch that it was resuscitated, that we were even made to pay money to these fraudsters and gave up ownership of Ajaokuta Steel. What a shame. In this country, we have the habit of celebrating people that are enslaving us. We need to open our eyes. We need to open our eyes. The only way Nigeria progresses is when we have a production leader. What we have now are consumption leaders, leaders that consume. You know, there was this story they gave about the locust and the ant. The locust, they consume. And after they finish consuming, they move somewhere else. We have low-cost leaders in Nigeria and many parts of Africa. They consume. After they consume everything, they relocate their families to Europe, to UK. Low-cost leaders, consumption leaders. And unfortunately, those are the signs that Tinubu is exhibiting. Meanwhile, what we need are production leaders. We need ants. People that are working, that will work to make Nigeria progress, that will take Nigeria into the part of production, which is actually the part of aggressive industrialization. Let me not talk too much. Let me take you a walk through the student loan so you can see the fraud in the student loan. And you see that there's really no reason to celebrate yet. When we raise this issue, many people are quick to complain and say, hey, give Tinubu time, give Tinubu time. We are not the ones that started this whole discussion about, oh, Tinubu is doing so fantastic. In just 3 weeks, in just 1 month, he has done so well. We were not the ones that started it. It was you people that started it. Claim that Tinubu is doing so well. within such a short time. And then we now come out to shine light on the things that you say Tinubu did. And then you are saying we should give him time. So you didn't know that he needed time before you came out to be bamboozling Nigerians, to say that Nigerians are singing Kumbaya, that Tinubu is winning over the hearts and minds of Nigerians? You didn't think that he needed time before you come to tell us that he's doing so well with the policies that he has put in place, policies that have put Nigerians into untold sufferings? You didn't know that we needed time? But we will talk about them. We will expose them, because we will overcome all of this repressiveness. It is our hope that things will change in a very short while. The right people will reclaim their mandate and Nigeria will move forward. But until that time, let us tell you this. The so-called student loan, Nigeria, is not for you. It's not for you at all. I will explain. Let me just walk you through this small presentation, and I will prove to you that the student loan is not for the poor Nigerians as they claim it is for. It is not for them. It is for rich Nigerians that are close friends of Tinubu. Let us take this small presentation. Student loan. Now, the student loan is an act to provide easy access to higher education for Nigerians through interest-free loans from Nigerian Education Bank, established in this act with a view to provide education for all Nigerians and for related matters. That's the purpose of the bill. The bill is supposed to help Nigerians access education, right? Provide education for all Nigerians. Meanwhile, there are conditions. Now, the second part you need to note is this. In subsection 3, it says that the loan referred to in this act shall be granted to students only for the payment of tuition fees. Did you catch that? The loan is only for the payment of tuition fees. Let's continue. Subsection 5 says, there is hereby established a bank to be known as the Nigerian Education Bank, which shall have functions and powers conferred on it by this act. So they will create a Nigerian Education Bank, a new bank that we have board of directors, and the chairman and members of the board shall be appointed by the president, subject to the confirmation of the National Assembly, and shall be persons of proven integrity. Now see this. What do you see? A private bank that is owned, whose board are going to be people that are chosen by the president. Why not set up that bank and let the board be made up of stakeholders in the education sectors? Stakeholders, and let the stakeholders choose from amongst themselves who their chairman will be. Why is it that it is the president that has to appoint? I will explain to you why it is so very shortly, so you will understand why this is actually fraud waiting to happen. We're still talking about the Student Loan Act and how it is not for the Nigerian people. They say it is to help the poor to get education, to access education easily. But from what we will see from the provisions of the act itself, you'll see that the student loan bill is not for the poor Nigerian. It is not. Let's read on. Now, here that the education bank will be able to, in addition to getting money from sources we will soon release or show, they are able to engage in other banking businesses. That is a door, a back door to corruption and fraud waiting to happen. If the education bank can have access to do other banking activities, why set up the education bank? Why not use normal bank and not waste Nigeria's taxpayers' money on the board of directors and staff that will be chosen by the president, which is actually a doorway for corruption? Why do that if you can just use existing banks? You will see. You will see very soon. Now, it says this is how the education bank will get its money. It's going to be 1% of all taxes, levies, and duties accruing to the government of the Federation from FIRS, Nigerian Immigration Services, and the Nigerian Customs Services. So the tax that and levies and duties that accrue to them, 1% of it will be taken in the name of giving loans to poor Nigerians in order to help them afford university education. But we will soon see that this 1% of monies will be collected and the average poor Nigerians out there will not be able to access it. And that leaves the people who are the board of directors, who are members of the board, and the president to do as they like with the funds. This is exactly what is happening with TED funds. This is exactly what is happening with ITF. This is exactly what is happening with education tax. We have those 3 taxes already, but the monies from these taxes, we don't know where the money goes. Yet, we are establishing another bank that will increase the taxes on Nigerians, because that's 1% of the monies accruing from levies, from FIRS, from Immigration Service, and from Customs. And then if you look at E there, it says 1% of all profits accruing to the government of the Federation arising from oil and other minerals. So monies, levies, taxes that are paid by oil companies or mineral extraction and processing companies, those 1% of tax also goes to this bank. Now, if all of these monies are not accessible to the average Nigerian out there, who then uses the money? That's the big question. That's the big question. Because if you look at subsection 18 in the conditions that the average Nigerians must meet, you'll see that 18.2 states that applicants' income or family income must be less than 500,000 naira per annum. Applicants' income or family income must be less than 500,000 naira per annum. Now, look at this. Applicants' income means that 500,000 naira per annum divided into 12 will give you 41,000 naira thereabout. 41,000 naira. That's applicant income. Or if the applicant has a father and a mother, and the father and the mother earns 30,000 each, combined, that becomes 60,000 each. That's minimum wage now. In a year, that is 720,000 naira. That means that a family that has father and mother working and earning minimum wage cannot access the student loan. Can you see the magic? A family that has father and mother earning minimum wage each, 30,000 each. You put the 30,000 together, it becomes 60,000 per month. Multiply that by 12, it becomes 720,000 naira. According to Section 18 now of the Student Loan Act, this family or father and mother cannot access the student loan for their child or children. If a family that is earning minimum wage, 30,000 naira, cannot access the loan, who is the loan now for? Meanwhile, let's not forget that the loan, let's go back to the beginning. The loan is for the loan is for students. Okay, fine. The loan referred to in this act shall be granted to students only for the payment of tuition fees. Now, for a family to access this loan, their family income has to be less than 500,000 naira per annum. Meaning that if you have a family that has above 500,000 naira per annum, they cannot access the loan. So for families that can access it, there are families that are the multidimensionally poor, the extremely poor, rest of the poor, that cannot afford 500,000 naira a year. And that means that those are really poor families. But see the problem with these people that can access the loan. The loan is only for school fees. The loan is only for school fees, for tuition fees. Now, this poorest of the poor people cannot provide the other monies for accommodation, for feeding, for transportation. They cannot. They cannot even afford to send their children to universities. So it means that even these people too, that have income less than 500,000, can also not access the loan. So who is the loan for? Of course, you saw, like we were shown here just now, you saw that the board is free to engage and participate in other banking businesses. So what will happen is this money will just be there, and they will be using this money to trade, using this money to make money, and probably sharing this money amongst themselves. Meanwhile, the people suffer. So when people clap for the student loan bill, I am amazed. Because if they really understood, they will see that the student loan is not for the Nigerian people. The poorest of the poor that they say it is supposed to help cannot afford the other monies that are required for higher education. They don't even bother to send their children to private primary secondary school, not to talk of sending their children to university. If you pay the school fees for them alone, the other monies they need to continue university education, they don't have. So obviously, they will not go to university or withdraw from university. So which means that they are disenfranchised. They don't have access to the loan. And then those who manage to at least be earning 30,000 minimum wage, they cannot access it, because by earning 30,000 minimum wage for father and mother, they have exceeded 500,000 naira per annum. And somebody is shouting that student loan is one of the things that Tinubu has done. Student loan is not for you. Even if you have the poorest of the poor that manages to secure the loan and probably goes to do something else, get loan from somewhere else to fund himself through school, there's no guarantee of jobs. And then, of course, after 2 years, they begin to look for you and locate you to come and pay up. Failure to pay up, they send you to jail, or you pay a fine of 500,000. You see, this student loan bill, as it is now, it's not for the poor Nigerians. It is not. It is just another means to take Nigeria's money and make it available to the rich friends of the president to play with as they wish, while the majority and the poorest of the poor Nigerians continue to suffer. So, can any good thing come from Tinubu? This is another reason for me to tell you no. Capital no. Capital no. This, it is clear that if it is a student loan bill that somebody is trying to capitalize on to say Tinubu is working, from what we just read, from the details, the fine details of the Student Loan Act, then you know that it is not for the Nigerian. It is to help the rich friends of those in power. It is fraud waiting to happen. So rather than clapping Nigerians should actually be angry. These monies could have been used to start the free food law, the social welfare law. That's what should be done. That's what we need to do. Nigerians, we cannot wait for any person to come and help us. We have to help ourselves. And to do that, we need to pursue this free food and social welfare law. That's one law we must pursue. Two, we must pursue the law to prohibit or ban foreign education for government workers, not only elected political officials, but for every government worker. Anybody that is working for government should not send their children, should not be able to send their children outside for foreign education. They should not. Because if they do, it is conflict of interest. You will have a situation such as we have now, where the people who are in charge of making education policies ruin the education system because they have the ability to take the monies that are meant to fund education, steal it, and use it to send their children abroad. And besides, when a government worker that is earning 200,000, that is earning 300,000, 400,000, 50,000, decides to send their children to school abroad, where will he get the money? That is invitation for that government worker to be corrupt. So to help the government workers and to help the Nigerian economy and to help our education system, we need to ban, to prohibit anybody that is working for government. We need to ban them from sending their children abroad for education. And we need to also do the same for medical treatment. We need to do it because so long as a President Tinubu can go to UK for medical treatment and his ministers can go to UK for medical treatment and the head of the parastatals, the Primary Healthcare Development Agency, can go to UK and go abroad, to US, to India for medical treatment, how do you think they will not steal the money that is meant for making our healthcare system work? How do you think they will not steal that money and use that money to go and give themselves medical treatment abroad? It is conflict of interest. Conflict of interest, and we need to stop it. Another thing we need to stop is the ability for a government worker to be able to have houses and have bank accounts abroad. It should be stopped. How many times do you hear that the president of America has a house in Nigeria? Even if they allow it, our own country, for our own conditions, we cannot allow it. It should not be allowed. We should stop it. Because so long as you have people like Festus Keyamo, who we saw his display on social media the other time about the house that he reportedly said he bought with his own money in the United States of America, house that is reported to be worth over 500,000 US dollars. 500,000 US dollars is about 300 million naira, because $1 million is 770 million naira. So $500,000 is 300 million. Do you know how many industries that could have set up in Nigeria here? Do you know how many people that would have been employed? And coincidentally, Festus Keyamo happened to be a minister of state for employment. Employment that Nigerians did not see. During his time as Minister of State for employment, he oversaw unemployment rate as high as 40%. And yet, he could take Nigeria's money that he claimed is his own money. He should come and tell us the work he did to earn $500,000. Took Nigeria's money and took it to America to go and buy one house. How many times in a year does Festus Keyamo stay in that house in America? You see the waste that these people put Nigeria through, the waste that these consumption leaders put Nigeria's resources to. So we should ban it. We need to ban it. We need to ban it. We need to ban it. Anybody that is working for government should not be allowed, should not be able to have an account abroad. His children should not be able to have an account abroad. He should not be able to buy properties abroad. If he wants to buy properties abroad, or if they want to buy properties abroad, they should resign their appointment. And after a period of 5 or 10 years, then they can buy. Else they go to jail. We can draw up these laws and force it on the National Assembly. These are the kind of laws that Nigeria needs. And of course, so that there will be an avalanche of jobs, we need to create a third law. We need to enact a third law. And that is a law to set up startup hubs, business startup hubs, and to engage in a indoctrination of Nigerians to have a business mindset, to have a production mindset. Because right now, Nigerians are just full of consumption. We are a consuming economy, following after the dictates of our consumption leaders. We consume, we don't produce. But if we set up this business hub law, this startup law, which will create business startup hubs across the geopolitical zones in Nigeria, business startup hubs. And what will these business startup hubs do? The business startup hubs will provide free power, free internet, and free office space. So Nigerian youths will be encouraged to go there, walk through the process of how to start different businesses in different sectors, and can just go there and start. You don't need to worry about the cost of renting an office, the cost of paying for internet, because in fact, we can even help them with joint services like secretary for correspondences in this startup law, business startup law. These are the 5 laws that will save Nigeria. We need to do these 5 laws. If not, conflict of interest will not let these consumption leaders let Nigeria develop. It will not. And that's what we are seeing so far. Look at serious countries like Kenya, like South Africa, went to France, like Ghana went to France, the same France that President Tinubu went to. And they were arguing with the IMF. Don't give us loans that we're not able to pay. These same loans that they are rejecting, they are the same loans that our president is telling us there will be an avalanche of. Loans that we know are not in our interest. They are loans that will never get to Nigeria. But at the end of the day, our resources are shipped to these other countries through their multinational corporations in the name of foreign direct investment. Nigerians, the ball is in our court. We need to take these 5 laws seriously. Conflict of interest will not let Nigeria develop. It will not. See, we are focused on corruption. Corruption is bad. But corruption is not the problem of Nigeria. Corruption makes things hard. Yes. Corruption is a platform that provides a platform for these consumption leaders to steal our resources and take them away to other places for the benefit of themselves and their families and their friends. Yes. But you see, Nigeria is not nearly as corrupt as the EU, as America, as UK, as Switzerland. Nigeria is not as corrupt as they are. Nigeria is not as corrupt as they are. If you tune into the local news in these countries, you will be shocked at how their local citizens in America, in UK, in EU are complaining about their leaders being corrupt. Yet those countries, according to us, are working. We want to copy those countries. So if those countries are corrupt, according to how their own citizens complain that their leaders are corrupt in the Americas and in the UK and in the EU, if those countries are corrupt and yet they are doing well, how come we are not doing well despite our leaders being corrupt? Don't get me wrong. Corruption is bad and must be stopped. But to stop corruption, it is not all these things that EFCC is doing. No. It is these 5 laws that must be enacted. These 5 laws must be enacted. These are the laws that will stop corruption. Because I just gave you the example of the civil servant who earns 250,000 naira as monthly salary. He has 2 children. and he's sending them abroad to go and school. That's an a venture that will cost nothing less than 40 million naira. So where will he get the money? He has to steal. So by simply allowing any government official, any government worker, and I'm not talking about elected government official or appointed government official alone, any government worker, whether they are teachers, whether they are civil servants, whether they are public servants, any government workers, whether they are army or soldiers or civil defense or navy or air force, any government worker, none of them should be allowed to send their children abroad to school. None of them should be allowed to send their children and themselves abroad for medical treatment. None of them should be allowed to have bank accounts, or their children have bank accounts, or buy houses, or their children buy houses abroad for a period. None of them should be allowed. Now, this does not go against the freedom, against any fundamental rights of anybody. This is simply taking care of conflict of interest. If those government workers wish that they want to send their children abroad, or that they want to travel abroad for medical treatment, or they want to send their children abroad to school, then they should resign government work. They should resign. They should recuse themselves, because it is conflict of interest to have the head of the UBEB, Universal Basic Education, sending his children to go school abroad, where the public schools in Nigeria are nothing to write home about. It's a conflict of interest. And this conflict of interest will continue until these 5 laws are enacted. So we need to enact these 5 laws. We are drafting them. We will draft them. And don't complain about whether or not they are perfect solutions or they're not perfect solutions. We will tailor make these solutions in such a way that they will address the needs of Nigerians. And then we will force them on the National Assembly. Don't worry about whether or not the National Assembly will accept the laws and pass them. This is where our pressuring will come. If they see that 10 million persons have signed the petition, and the people on the street, the young man on the street, the old woman on the street, the old man on the street understands that these laws are going to be passed, particularly the free food stamp and social welfare law that exists in America, that exists in Europe, that is helping those who cannot help themselves. If they see this, they will now see the lawmakers that will not pass it, and they will know how to vote subsequently. Don't worry about that. This is how we fix this country. This is how we fix it. This is how we take care of these consumption leaders once and for all. And it's something that we need to do. I beg you in the name of God. So whatever you can do, please do. We need volunteers in drafting these laws. We will draft them ourselves. We will not rely on these lawmakers. Because right now, I'm even afraid for the lawmakers, even the Labour Party lawmakers. You saw what this House of Rep lawmaker has been going around saying, that he has seen the light after collecting our votes, the same votes that we were tortured and beaten and stabbed for, the same votes that APC terrorized us for and rigged us out for, the ones that we stood firm and got for them, they are now coming out to come and tell us that they have seen the light. Tinubu is a wonderful person. Oh, we need to begin this process of recall. And he's the one that is even shouting. The others that are not shouting are doing even worse. So that's why I say that these lawmakers, until they prove me wrong, they are guilty as charged. They have compromised. So we will come up with these laws ourselves, and we will go to them. Then we will see their reaction, and we will know how to implement the recall or how to vote when it comes to the next election cycle. That's pending what happens at the tribunal anyway. But we must start now. We must start now to take back Nigeria from the hands of these evil ones. Stand up for Nigeria. Don't sit idly by. Don't go silent and say, let's sit down and look. No, the more time passes, the worse the policies of Tinubu will get. We need to start now by taking action to mitigate his actions, to mitigate these policies. Yes, as we do this, all actions are on deck. All actions are on deck. We do this, we are watching the judiciary and we are watching the legislature as well as we are watching the executive. We have to shine our eyes. Part of it is to do these 5 laws that will fix Nigeria. We need contributions, please. Contribute to us. We need funds to get volunteers to pay them something to go around, because we need to take these messages to the grassroots. This is how they have kept the people poor, by making it difficult for information to reach them. How many of Nigerians are on social media? How many of them can afford the data to watch these kind of videos? How many of them have the maturity, well, not maturity, the choice? Because we have been so brainwashed to be deceived by football, to be deceived by movies, to be deceived by music, to be deceived by entertainment. We have been so brainwashed that is all our youth care about. And those are the things that they are using to make sure that we are perpetually enslaved. So it is our responsibility to go out and expose these secrets, these lies to the people. And we need resources to do that. So please support us. Check the details in the description. And then let's get Nigeria back from the hands of these wicked ones.